Well, Halloween's just around the corner, and so are those little kids all dressed up, and little kids of all ages as we get to be a nation of children. More and more of us are growing ourselves costumes that are 6.5 feet tall and so on and so forth. And I wanted to talk about the morality of Halloween. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. And this right angle episode, like all of them, is brought to you by the paying members at BillWhittle.com. Guys, you know, there's occasionally you hear a storm about the morality of Halloween. Sometimes you hear certain Christian churches will come out and say that it's satanic and and it's got all these origins in this and so on and so forth. The reason I'm interested in this particular year is that my Russian wife is telling me that there's an article and a lot of talk going on in Russia right now about how Halloween is the American celebration of hell, and that is Hell-O-Ween, and they're not being funny with words. They think that's what it means. They think it means the hell ceremony, where the Yankee death machine celebrates its gory hands of conquest and imperialism and all the rest of it. It's painted America in a very negative light as far as that's concerned. I maintain something of the opposite. Scott, let's start with you. First of all, I'm going to ask you the default question, which is, what was your maybe not the best, but your most memorable Halloween costume? I just got to get that out of the way.
Well, at work the other day, we had some members of the sales team at the furniture store where I work who were in costume, and they were remarking about them during our morning meeting and complimenting them on their costumes. And after the meeting was over, I said, I'm surprised that nobody said anything about my costume. And people just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, I go to all the effort to dress up as Bradley Cooper, and nobody says anything. So, but actually, my favorite Halloween costume of all time was when I went out as a marine iguana. And the entire costume was actually just a mental construct. So if anybody asked me,
come on,
if anybody asked me,
serious, I want to know about your favorite pajama and mask.
If anybody asked me what I was supposed to be, because everybody was at this party in costume, I had studied up on marine iguanas, and so then I would go into detail about the life I led as a marine iguana and how I ate and where I lived and all that kind of stuff.
That is actually shockingly brilliant.
All the other kids were getting full-size candy bars, and you were getting the little Twizzlers.
I was an adult. I was an adult when I did this. I was probably 30
so
years old.
What is your favorite childhood Halloween costume?
In childhood, I once dressed up as a woman, not because I thought it would be a great thing to dress as a woman, but because I forgot to get a costume, and it was the last minute, and we didn't have anything. And so I actually borrowed clothes from my nan and dressed up as a woman. And the best moment of the night was when we walked back this really long driveway to Mrs. Wells' house and got to the door, and she was absolutely convinced that I was her granddaughter, Belinda, and just kept going. And part of my shtick was I never spoke because I didn't want to give away my voice, and so I would just pretend that I was a girl the whole time. And she was just like, oh, I know it's you, Belinda. I know it's you.
Did you curtsy like this? Could you pull that off? So to the more serious question for you, Scott. You're an extremely religious person. We admire that very much about you, and find your principles.
I challenge your presumption, but go ahead.
I find your principles to be very, very sound. Do you have any problem at all with Halloween from a religious Christian basis? Or a moral basis
not really from that basis. I mean, to me, at this point in my life, it's an annoyance because people keep knocking at your door and they don't really want to come in or talk or anything. But no, I think that there are friends of mine who are convinced that along with other elements of our society are part of a demonic influence. It was actually kind of started off as a religious holiday that was All Hallows Eve, and then kind of like many
All
things.
Saints Day is November 1st.
Yeah, morphed into something else. I think in many ways it's a goof. It's something where people dress up and they go out and they have fun and they see their neighbors. And where we used to live in Pennsylvania, that people used to a lot of people used to make it like a barbecue night. They'd sit out in their garages and invite their buddies over, and kids would come up, and there's a little party going on at a lot of these houses. So that's kind of fun. Now, I will say that I think it is a little weird in recent years how fascinated our entire society seems to have become with things like vampires and zombies and corpses. And by corpses, I mean just like every TV show I watch, it seems like there's got to be at least one scene in the morgue where they're cutting somebody open, or out on a crime scene where there is some sort of gore and a dismembered body, or and it seems like we have
zombies, especially.
Yeah,
They're
lots of
everywhere.
zombies. So we've got it seems to me more than usual fascination with that. I don't know what to make of that. It doesn't seem to me to be extraordinarily healthy. But I'm not reading too much into it. And if you are, in fact, somebody who dresses up like a zombie, Jesus loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life.
If Jesus loved them, they wouldn't be zombies. They'd be in heaven, Scott.
That's right.
Zombies roam the earth because hell is full.
George Romero taught it.
That's very interesting. I happen to think that this cultural fascination with zombies and death and vampires and stuff, we kind of presaged this. There was a period there on Discovery Channel when there was like nothing but 35 different documentaries about how the Earth will look if people just suddenly disappeared. After man, 50 years after man, 100 years after man. It's like, why are we so fascinated with this? And then somebody was talking about the Walking Dead, and I don't think this applies to Hell-O-Ween. I think this is a much deeper issue. People said that some anonymous commentator who I cannot remember said that when civilization is so safe and protective, the only adventure is destroying the civilization. And I thought that's exactly right. Zombies give you a chance to think about things that most people didn't have to speculate about, like, can I protect my family against an onrushing horde of people who want me dead? So I suppose that there's a sense that fascination in the culture has got to do with a very late stage society that is so secure and so filled with abundance that that the only thing to really imagine that's half exciting is what would happen if it went away. Steve, let's go to you. First of all, your most memorable Halloween costume?
I've got two of them. One, you have to go back to 1980. This might shock you, but I was a young member of the Star Wars fan club, and we got a special issue before Empire Strikes Back came out. This really cool side shot of Boba Fett, and this cool pose with his rifle, and it was annotated. There were lines pointing to each cool thing on his uniform and what it was. This is the flamethrower. This is the rocket launcher. This is the big rocket launcher. These are the knee dart launchers and braided Wookiee scalps and all the rest. And just by chance, shortly after this came out, I found on my grandfather's workbench this little piece of sort of perforated metal that looked just like the communicator on his wrist thing. And I got an idea. I could build a Boba Fett costume. And this is when, costumes sucked, frankly, right? And over the next few months, and it did take months for almost no money, I made the helmet out of paper mache. I made the armor out of
cool, man.
Out of the cardboard that used to come in shirts from the dry cleaner.
Sure.
Yeah, I cut all the armor shapes out of that, and I held it together with duct tape that I had wrapped against itself, where you could see it, so that it looked like the actual straps on his uniform. I mean, I went all out, and this was an 11-year-old kid doing this project for months on a budget of almost nothing. I mean, I had to buy a couple of cans of spray paint and stuff, and
awesome.
some paper mache supplies, and that costume might not have been perfect. The visor tee, only part of it was see-through. I pulled the lens out of my ski goggles and had that part cut out. The rest was just black paint. But I was self-motivated, and I made it from scratch and almost no money, and I was so proud of that thing. It was just great. I had a lot of fun. And of course, Empire had only been out for a few months, and nobody knew who Boba Fett was, and that part was kind of a bust.
That's extremely impressive. So it's interesting you mentioned Star Wars, because that goes to the question I wanted to ask you.
Well, hang on. Let me finish the other thing. This Halloween, we went to our big party last week, and I repeated a thing that I did at a con in April, where I was every red shirt from Star Trek. I had the old TOS red shirt uniform, the pants, the boots, everything. Except I had covered my face and hands with every wound tattoo imaginable. I had the arrow through the head, my arm in a sling, and ace bandage around my knee. So I was every red shirt. That's
got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you about the thing that is constantly, our honorable opponents on the left there is one remarkable ability that I will grant to progressives, and it really it is an absolute, almost miraculous ability, and that is the unbelievable skill they have at sucking the joy out of any single thing that happens to exist in the world. So what do you think about this whole cultural appropriation thing, and people saying, well, I don't know if you could get dressed up as this or that? And Scott, were you saying Hillary made some, not Hillary, what's her name, was making some comments on that, former Fox, Megyn Kelly.
Megyn Kelly.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you feel about this whole thing, Steve? Are you as insensitive a racist, Nazi, homophobe, misogynist as I suspect you are?
You know why I love Halloween? Have you ever heard of these come as you are parties? Where the invitation goes out just 30 minutes before, and you got to grab a bottle of something and just show up. If you're in your bathrobe, you show up in your bathrobe. Halloween is a nationwide come as you aren't party. It's a chance. Thank you. It's a chance to be whatever you want to be, even if it's only for a few hours, and your imagination should be the limit. So to our Democratic friends who like to suck the fun out of everything, all I can say is blow it out your donkey.
Okay, well done. My favorite Halloween, most memorable Halloween costume, and my favorite too, was I seem to remember somewhere around age 7 or 8, I went out as Flipper, which... as a kid growing up in Bermuda, wanted a pet dolphin real bad. And when I realized you could go out as Flipper, I thought, great. And looking back on it, the fact that the dolphin head was sideways, so that you could get that paper-thin mask on your head,
yes.
And then you put the mask on, and just as you were heading to the second or third house, that rubber band would break. There'd be no way to really fix it while you were there.
You had to hold
and
it by
you
the
wore
chin.
You wore the pajamas, the one-piece things with there's a picture of like Flipper all the way down, a little tail at the bottom, and you tied it up with that little cloth string at the on the back end and stuff. And I just remember thinking that was a Flipper. I went out as a cetacean. It's not as impressive as Scott going as an iguana because I didn't have a whole backstory prepared. I just went and asked for candy. I didn't have a thesis on sonar communication and understand the mating rituals and all the rest.
Next time, brother.
Next time. Let me just say one thing about this cultural appropriation to these bunch of humorless, whining, complaining children. I just want to know one thing. You can't dress up as an Oriental, as a geisha. You can't dress up as an Indian. You can't dress up as any of these things. It's appropriating our culture. I would like tonight to know that on Wednesday, on Halloween Eve, I want to know how many Asian, Black, and Hispanic kids are going out as Batman, Spider-Man, Superman. I want to know the numbers of those kids that are going out and becoming white characters that are part of my culture, that I am part of, and that you don't get to be part of, and it's got nothing to do with you. And how dare you, young Mexican-American child, dress up as Spider-Man when Spider-Man is clearly a white Caucasian. I am mortally offended by all of this. I'd like to know what the numbers are, because I think it's just plain absolutely absurd, and I think everybody else does. So one final thought of some seriousness. This thing about the Russians talking about America, death cult and stuff, actually bothered me enough to want to do this episode. And what's interesting about it is the first Halloween with my wife, my Russian wife, we went around and she was actually disturbed at a lot of the skeletons and the headstones and things of that nature. It really actually bothered her. And the lighter elements of it, of course, she thought was fun, but the dead things really bothered her. And I realized that she's seen and been through so many things and has been through such horrors in so many ways. Just as a small example, I mean, it's the number of animals that are hit by cars in Russia it's like the sidewalks just littered with them, It's really these kind of things. And so she didn't understand it. And what I think I was able to explain to her, she's fully in the spirit now, by the way, is what I think is most fascinating about Halloween, and that is this. We, as Scott said, we got to have a corpse in every episode of TV now. We're fascinated with death and decay because we don't have any. And it interests us in a way that, Martians might interest us. Dead people interest us in the same way as Vulcans might interest us. We have a society that's so sanitized. Most people don't get to see a dead body of relatives even. Usually, person you found out Uncle Jim has passed away, and then you go to a service where there's a box and a picture and okay. And so I think what's actually bad about Halloween is that it has become an adult holiday because we're now a nation of adult children. But on the other hand, I think the thing about Halloween, American Halloween, is actually extremely beautiful and cool. And that's this. We have become so prosperous and so successful that we not only can afford to, but we relish and spend vast fortunes on the idea of mocking death. Just mocking it. Death and destruction has the seriousness of a styrofoam headstone that you put in your yard once a year, to scare kids off. I find it actually extremely healthy that a society could be this free of the kind of things that would bother other people. So that the idea of littering bones and tombstones and skulls and spiders and vampires around your yard and seeing who could spend the most money doing it is actually a kind of a way of saying, death does not touch us here. Not here, no. We are going to have to face it someday, and then that'll be the way it is. And nobody I know is getting dressed up as terminal patients, and it's just hey. The hell, is what we say. That's what we think about your whole death cult. That's my take on it anyway, for whatever it's worth. Have a great Halloween out there, folks. I hope you have a good time, and I hope you don't let these miserable crybabies ruin what is a chance to be somebody else one day a year. And what's wrong with that? It's as American as rotten apple pie. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on Right Angle.